Okie dokie. Hi there, folks, and welcome to the exciting world of the basic Flash CS4 tutorial. This thing is going to show you how to make this. Isn't that exciting? This tutorial is designed to introduce fairly simple animation techniques in Flash. It's not designed to show you things in great depth. Now, before you get too stuck into this, you really do need to either A, have seen a more lengthy explanation of this, perhaps in a lecture, or B, you most certainly should be familiar with the very basic Flash interface and some of the basic Flash bits and pieces, because we're going to jump through fairly quickly on some things on this, assuming already a basic knowledge of Flash. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get cracking. We're going to kick off with a Flash ActionScript 2 file for reasons that will be explained at a later date. Okay, next step is to go to the Modify Document setting, and we're going to change the size of our Flash document to 550 pixels by 150 pixels, because effectively what we're trying to make is a banner, a web banner. We're going to leave everything else on default, including the frame rate at 24 frames per second. There we go. Now, I'm not sure if I just introduced myself. I'm Roger Quinn, and I have my faithful assistant, Lyndall McGovern.
Hi.
And, we're going to chime in with a few bits and pieces as we go with this to try and explain what we're doing. Okay, now the first thing that we are looking at with this is to create the blue ball that you may recall went floating across the screen. So this is a very basic form of movement in Flash. And let's have a go. I've chosen the blue drawing object tool. And you folks may find that sitting underneath the rectangle. And I'm now going to choose the blue fill color. It doesn't really matter which one you choose, just something similar to this. I'm also going to make sure there is a black stroke color. Okay, I'm choosing all this down in the left-hand tool menu. You may also notice that those things are available over here in the Properties Inspector. A very important thing to notice there is the stroke weight. Now, we do want to use a stroke of, it just so happens, 2 point. But you will often find that Flash will default to having 1 point in there. So you can move the slider along, or you can just type in the amount that you want. And we're ready to go. Now, if I just start drawing with that circle tool, you'll see that it will create, ellipses and all sorts of things. If you want to make sure that it's absolutely a circle, just hold down Shift as you're dragging. And like most of the graphics programs, you'll find that that constrains. Alright, so we're just going to leave it approximately that size. Now, a very quick explanation of why we are going to turn this into a symbol in a minute is because if you just click and you move things around, you'll find that Flash will treat the stroke, if I can just display that there, oh, that's getting even more ridiculous, and the fill as very separate entities. Now, Illustrator doesn't do that, and other similar programs don't do that, so that can often cause confusion for people who are new to Flash. There's all sorts of mysterious reasons why they do this in Flash. We're going to find a way of working around that, and one way of doing that is to select both the stroke and the fill together, and it also introduces the use of symbols. So what I'm going to do is select all of that stuff on screen there together, and a quick easy way of doing that is simply to just select the layer by clicking on the layer name, and automatically selects everything there. Okay, and then we're going to choose Convert to Symbol, which is sitting in the Modify menu. Now, this is a very important sort of aspect of using Flash, and the reason for that is because ultimately this method of converting things to symbols can save a lot of file size. Okay. Now, one of the choices that you get here, you get choice of 3 different types of symbol. One's a movie clip, one's a button, and one is a graphic. We want to use graphics throughout this. We're going to call this blue ball because it is a blue ball. And you'll notice on screen that changes to, it's no longer showing us the fill or the stroke selected, it's showing us a blue sort of like marquee line around that to indicate that it's all selected as one thing. The other thing that's now done is, if we have a quick look over in our properties menu, if I select the library icon, it shows us we've now got a thing called blue ball sitting in our library. A library is basically a component of Flash that means it's now stored the information for that blue ball in the library. So if this became a much larger Flash project and we were using that blue ball many times, it means it's only being remembered by the file once, rather than the 40 or 40,000 times we may wish to use that throughout a Flash project, which of course means it's saving an awful lot of file size by just saving it once. Righto. Let's move on with some movement. And what I'd like to do is start the movement of this blue ball off the stage and have it move on the stage as it starts to play. And we're going to use a very straightforward, simple method called motion tweening. And the way to do that is, first of all, just double check that everything's sort of sitting back here in frame 1. And then we're going to go to the insert menu, and oh, by the way, it's very important to make sure you have got this actual thing selected. Okay, so I've got layer 1 selected, I've clicked on it. You can tell the symbol selected because it's got the blue line around it. I'm going to go insert and say motion tween. There is a choice of classic tween there, but we're going to leave that for the moment and explain that maybe in another video. So we're choosing standard motion tween. Alright, and it's put a blue bar on the screen. If we hit return, nothing happens. And that's because we haven't told it what we want it to do over that period of time. Okay. Now incidentally, that's the default of 24 frames. We're using a frame rate of 24 seconds. It defaults to sort of filling up your motion tween with 24. You can actually move that 20 length that you want. So we're going to make that 15 frames for our purposes. Okay, now smack on frame 15, I'm going to tell that to have moved onto the stage. So what I've just done there is I've got my playback head, which is that red little bar, on frame 15, and I've selected the symbol of the blue ball and I've moved it back onto the stage. And you'll notice what's immediately happened there is that I'm getting not only a little dot that appears in frame 15, but I'm also getting a green line with a bunch of little green dots. And that's simply indicating a motion path. And if I now hit return, you'll see that the blue ball actually moves on the screen. Exciting stuff. Now, there's all sorts of interesting things going on there, which again, we're just going to move over for the time being. There's some all sorts of detail involved with this motion path. That's modifiable, and you can do all sorts of exciting things with the motion editor and blah, 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 blah. But that's getting into a lot of detail that we don't really need at this point. But just to indicate that some of those symbols you're seeing there are really to refer to more complicated additional things you can do to that movement. And as I said, we'll perhaps move on to that at a later date. So there we go. Okay, lastly, before we move on to the next step in this, I just want to name that layer.
Why do you need to name a layer?
Well, Lyndall, you need to name the layer because it's the same reason really that we were naming the symbol. And the reason we were doing that is because it makes the management of a Flash file a lot easier if you've named things sensibly and logically as the project starts to grow. Now for this one that we're working on, it's not a particularly complex thing, so it probably isn't critical that we do this, but when you're learning Flash, if you get into the habit of naming everything logically, you will find that life is a whole lot easier when your projects get more complicated.
I see.
Okay, so let's move on. We're going to add a new layer. Okay, and to do that, we simply go to that small icon at the bottom of the timeline there on the left. And you'll notice if you hover your mouse over, you see these little sort of things pop up indicating what they do. So just click on that. It adds a new layer. It uses its default of layer 2. Now the defaults are always called layer. Another reason why it's a good idea to name them. And at the moment nothing appears in the screen there. And what we're going to do is we're going to now add an orange box. Use the same method we just used to draw the blue ball. Instead we're going to use an orange box. So go and choose orange for the fill color. Again, it's not critical which orange you pick here, just pick something similar to what we're using. And I'm going to turn the stroke off. So I'm turning the stroke to the no fill, or the no stroke sort of symbol. And then I'm going to draw a box, roughly in the middle of the screen. I'm just holding shift to constrain that just for the heck of it. And there we go. Now again, it's not critical that that be absolutely smack in the middle. You could move it there if you want to. Now what that's done in layer 2, it's now introduced that orange box to be there for 15 frames. And the reason why it's doing that is because Flash defaults to matching whatever current frame movement you've got going on in the activity. Because it assumes you're going to want to match that. Obviously you can change that if you want to. In our case, we do want it to be there for those 15 frames, so we're not going to change that. Now what I'd like to do is introduce a slightly different method of motion tweening. This time instead of moving this orange box sort of physically across the screen there, we're going to just get it to grow in size. So we use the same process that we did with the circle to start off with. I'm going to select, oh, before we do, let's make that orange box into a symbol. So we select it all, convert to symbol, orange box is the name we'll give it, and it is a graphic, not a movie clip or a button. And we can explain what those two other things are some other time. And there we go. And now we shall put the motion tween on. So with the playback head in frame 1 and we have a layer 2 selected, we go to insert motion tween. And we'll get the same effect we had before with the blue circle. And that's what I'm now going to do. Same process once again, go to frame 15. Okay, I'm going to click on the orange box at frame 15. Okay, it's very important to keep an eye on where the playback head is. So it's frame 15 is where we want it. And this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the dimensions of that orange box to change. Now over here in the properties inspector on the right, it's telling us the width and height of that box. Now making sure that the little lock icon is turned off, so it's not currently locked, it means the width and height will act separately. I'm going to simply type in 550 pixels wide and 150 pixels high. That's matching the screen, the stage dimensions. And I'm also going to put the X and Y coordinates, which means it's indicating where that's actually sitting on the stage. So if I put 0 and 0, it means it's going to put it right up in the top left hand corner, and so that means it's fitting it perfectly to the stage size. So if I now play that back.
Oh, but what's happened to the blue circle?
Ah, that's an incredibly good question, Lyndall. What's happened there is when we introduce a new layer, it immediately puts it on top of what was there before.
Can we change that?
Oh, we certainly can. We certainly can. We're going to do that in a minute. We're going to change the layer order around. So for the moment, it's not critical. There's one more thing I'd like to do to the orange box, and that is also to show that you can not only have movement happening and shape happening, but you can also change the colour of something using a motion tween. And the way we do that is exactly the same process we've just been using. We're going to sort of add an additional effect to that keyframe we've just added in frame 15. You may notice this little symbol appeared in frame 15 for both the circle and the layer. When we made that motion tween, we start off with a dot indicating that the symbol was there, and in frame 15 there's a diamond which indicates that there is a change to that object happening in that particular frame. And we're going to make another one. So in frame 15 of layer 2, I'm going to click on the orange box once again, and then over in the properties inspector we can see that there's an option not only for the position and size, but a thing called color effect. And if you click on that, you'll find that there's 4 choices you have for mucking around with the colors. There's all sorts of detail we can go into here about what those different options do. For the moment we're going to just stick with brightness. Okay, those other things are related, they're all affecting colour, but they can take an awful long time to explain, and they're not really necessary for this tutorial for the time being. So just choosing brightness, and the other things work in a similar way anyway, you'll find that if you move the slider around, that's going to affect the colour, the brightness of the colour that we started with. So we just want this to end up on a paler version of that orange. So I'm going to go with something like 50% brightness, not 5p, but 50%, which means it's going to be like a skin tone. And if we hit play, whoops, if we hit OK to that, we go back to this and hit play, you'll see, I'll just move that by hand, the orange box starts out at 100% orange and then gradually morphs to the paler tone. Okay, so to quickly recap there, we've not only changed and put a motion tween on the physical size of that box, but we've changed the color effect as well. And now I'll just finish off that section by naming the layer, which is good housekeeping, as we mentioned before. And then to change the layer order, I'm going to select just by clicking on it, the blue circle layer. And just like in Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator, in the layers, you just click and drag that layer above the other one. And if you had 12 layers, you can just drag that into any particular part of the order you want. And now what that will do is it places the blue ball on top of the orange box.
Wow.
Isn't that exciting?
It is exciting.
Hey, you know what we haven't done? We haven't saved. Always a good idea to save in these things. So we're going to save this file and we're going to leave this part 1 of this exciting tutorial here, and then we're going to return very shortly for part 2, where we will see things like swirly bits and bits of type coming in there doing exciting things. And we're also going to show you how to export this as a file that can work on the web. But for the moment, let's just save. So I've got to save as, and I'm saving this, and I'm going to call it Flash Tutorial. There we go. And it's now saved as a Flash file, not a Shockwave file. It's a Flash file. Okay, we'll explain the difference very shortly. But for now, bye.